Adam Savage here for Tested with another one-day build. Today's is actually pretty cool. A few months ago, I was reached out to by British actor Matt Berry, who was preparing to make a show called Rabbit Run, in which he plays a 19th century British policeman named Rabbit. And he was reaching out to me to ask if I was interested in designing and building the hero prop for his policemen. And back then, those policemen, well, just like today, they didn't carry guns, they carried truncheons. They carried small batons that were about a foot long, and they wore them in a leather holster on their belt. And he wanted his character Rabbit to have a very specific truncheon that was his. It would have an image of a rabbit in it, and it would be like this hero talisman for his main character. And I took that job, and that is what I'm going to build today. Now, we went back and forth on a lot of different designs for truncheons because there were some really amazing ones and a huge variance. Some of them had steel ends, some had lead, some were made of wood, some had ivory inlay, brass, the works. And I was thinking about this for several weeks, and then I realized I think I knew the perfect shape for this truncheon. Now, to tell you about this perfect shape, I have to go back and mention that a few years ago, my wife and I decided to follow Diana Kennedy's famous mole recipe for Oaxacan mole and give out mole to everyone for Christmas. The thing about this recipe is that it's like 9 kinds of chilies, each one that gets prepared in different ways, and we were mortaring and we were pestling and we were blending for days and days and days. There are still spots on the ceiling of my kitchen from that mole extravaganza. And once we were done, I was thinking we need a better mortar and pestle, and I started looking online for one, and I found this crazy gigantic mortar and pestle made of marble that was like this big, seriously, like 18 inches across. I've never found another one this large, made by a company called Acme in the mid-century. It's a long way of saying the pestle for this is this puppy. Look at this beautiful, gorgeous object. It's too big to be a police truncheon. It's got to be a bit smaller and perhaps just a little bit narrower. And I am going to use this as my guiding principle for Rabbit's truncheon. I'm going to follow the shape. I'm going to follow the overall design. I may change some of the proportions, but it's going to be wood down here, steel up here. It's not going to be real steel. I'm going to replicate steel with aluminum. So, let's get started. Okay, so this is my overall shape, this pestle. I am going to redraw it as a smaller object, perhaps slightly with slightly less of a bulbous end. And I have some materials here that I'm going to use. So this will be for the handle. This is a nice chunk of ash that I have. I like ash, it's easy to machine. I can darken it later with some stains and some paint. I have a chunk of aluminum that will be the end of this truncheon. Now, truncheons were, I believe, I don't know my British police history very well, but I believe they were issued by the Crown, because most of the truncheons I found pictures of that were antiques had a little British Crown symbol on them. I'm going to replicate that, and I'm likely to etch it using some acid, using a technique that was told to me by Peter Lyon from Weta Workshop. I also plan to put a little insignia in the end, and to that end, I bought some British police buttons that I am going to polish to weather them a little bit, and I'm going to machine a little bit of a recess in here so this sucks right in there and makes the whole thing look a little more official. I bought these on Amazon for like $1.50. All right, so first up, we gotta get to drawing. Here we go. I think I have roughly the layout of this. It follows the shape. It is narrower. Obviously, it's got to be able to be carried in a holster on someone's belt, and this is ridiculous. But what I like about this is there aren't many British truncheons shaped like this, so this definitely makes it kind of unique. I'm going to do the handle out of wood, just like the pestle, the front piece out of aluminum, and I'm going to have this middle collar in brass. I'm going to age some brass, a brass ring, and put it in there. First and foremost, I got to get this handle right, so that's the first thing I'm going to turn out of this ash. Yep. Good. I'm going to get covered in dust during this, but that looks promising. Ooh, promising. Yeah, I could do this on my machine lathe, but I've got a wood lathe. Why not use a wood lathe for lathing wood? I will eventually move this piece of ash to the machine lathe to do some of the final finishing, but this will get me mostly in the room in terms of the overall shape. That's the overall widest width I'm hoping to get this wood to, and I only need about that much of it, so we should be pretty good here. We are going to do what I personally refer to as climbing the sandpaper ladder. I have machined everything, I have lathed everything about a 1/16 of an inch over my critical dimensions, and I have a little bit of a rough surface on here. You can see it in this close-up. And I'm going to try and remove that rough surface by starting with an 80 grit and working my way up to 180 grit. I should get this handle nice and smooth. But the shape is starting to take form, and I'm really pretty pleased with it. Move from 80 grit to 100 grit. Now it's starting to become really smooth. I'm starting to get rid of all the little marks. You can start to see a shine is showing up here. And if you could feel it, it's feeling pretty smooth, like a bottom of a baby's foot. Norm Chan knows what that feels like. He's got a fresh one back home. I mean, a fresh pair of baby feet. I bet he'd agree, like, oh yeah, that feels like Avery's feet. I'm very pleased with that. Ah, yeah, look at that. Beautiful. My hole is roughly center all the way through the handle. That's really great. This allows me to actually sink a piece of all thread all the way through this into the end of the truncheon to give it some extra strength. Got a little nick here. There's a little nick, but I don't mind that. I'm actually, that's part of the history of this handle. It got nicked, yeah? So I don't see any reason to worry about it. This is his talisman. This is Rabbit's right hand, and you know, it gets into some scrapes, and it gets scraped itself. One of the nice things about drilling into a big heavy piece of aluminum like this is that it acts as its own heat sink. It pulls heat away from the cut, which keeps the drill bit cooler. You can't do this endlessly. Eventually your drill bit does heat up. And the aluminum does a great job keeping it away. Parting off big chunks of aluminum is always a really fraught and potentially dangerous operation because it's a lot of friction and things can get caught. And it was a pretty big change in my life when I realized I could do it at a nice slow speed on the lathe rather than at high speed. It's much safer this way. Here it goes. Doink. Wow, that is a that's a heavy object, is what that is. Okay. Yeah. Doink. Doink. Obviously, when he's swinging these at other actors, he's not swinging the aluminum one. I now need to darken that piece of wood, but this is really shaping up to be a thing. That is, you don't want to mess with a guy who's got this on his belt. I don't want to mess with a guy who's got this on his belt. Okay, good. I'm feeling very positive about all of this. I need to make some small cuts and some adjustments in here. We are moving apace. I want to do a little more polish on the end of this guy just to get rid of some of these little lines here. So I'm going to chuck this back into the lathe and grab it right like that. Give it a little bit of a thwack with this puppy. Yeah, look at that. It looks dinged, it looks beat up, it looks like it's got a little history to it. I love it. Okay, now let's get a polish on this puppy. I'm very pleased with that. It is time to etch the titular character, the rabbit, right here in the end. How am I going to do that, you wonder? I'm going to do that with a bit of ferric chloride. Yeah. You want to be able to see it for camera. It's a narrative device. That is clearly a rabbit, and if I etch that a couple times, if I see an old, I think the rabbit should be a little bit smaller. Yeah, okay, so let's do it like that. Now, I could have loaded this file into my Cricut cutter, and I don't need these anymore. I could have loaded this file into my Cricut cutter and made a mask, but frankly, given that this is a piece of 19th century hardware, I didn't want it to look too neat. I wanted it to look a little bit rough around the edges, and that is why I'm going with a hand-cut mask. I want it to feel... If you looked at, like, actually go right now, Google Paul Revere's plates, and you'll see his etching on it, and it looks really crunchy. If you, like, bought a replica of it at the Paul Revere Museum, if they have a gift shop, I mean, I've been there, but I can't remember if they have a gift shop, they would do this etching that looked really clean because they can do that with computers and with lithography and stuff like that these days. But back in the old days, it was all done by hand, and it's so clearly obvious. You can see it. So to me, that's a key part of the veracity of the prop. Wow, sorry about all the squeaking. There we go. There's my rabbit outline. Ferric chloride is an etchant. It reacts with various metals, the most common one being copper, and it's used to etch PCBs, custom computer boards for various projects, but it also apparently does just fine on aluminum. So the byproduct of the etching is hydrogen, so it's not like it's poisonous, but it is flammable. So I'm just going to want to get some on here and start to let the reaction happen. A couple weeks ago off camera, I did some of the very first steel etching I've done here in the shop. I used some diluted nitric acid to etch a sword blade. This is an etch I'm going to do on camera, but this is the first time I've etched aluminum. And apparently you're supposed to just wait for the reaction to stop, and then you rinse it, and if you want to go deeper, you go again. This is the first time I'm etching stuff. It's really exciting. Hey, while this is etching, I'm going to add some stain to the handle here so that I can make it look a little darker. And I'm going to try and choose a dark stain, red mahogany, dark walnut. I think that's where I want to start. Yeah, that's cool. Got some of my hand dirt on there before I stained it. Normally, for fine woodworking, you'd want to clean this thing really nicely, but I'm making an old thing. I'm making a new thing that looks old, so I'm gonna leave some of those imperfections and let them tell some of my story. And let that sit on there and soak in. I'm gonna let you think about what you did. Looks like it's etching nicely. I'm going to keep continuing to go a little deeper. Bubbling up nicely. Awesome. All right, I'm going to clean this off, wash it out, and see how deep this 5 or 6 passes that etching has actually gotten. Let's see how my rabbit looks. If after I peel off the tape, I can still fix this if I've gotten it wrong. It's a very forgiving process. So let's see. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, there's a rabbit in the end of that truncheon. Look at that. That's a nice dimensional etch right there. I'm gonna wash it out with a little more water just to make sure it's no longer going through its etching pass. I'm really, really pleased with that. That's a nice rabbit. Yep. Oh, brass is so delicious. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, I have one more mark to put on this. These truncheons were often made, they were government issued, it seems, and each one had a little crown. So I want to etch a little crown into there. And a little RR. That's the rabbit run. There's my drawing. I'm feeling pretty good about this. It's my first time etching. I feel like it's going pretty good. All right, I'm gonna peel up the tape and I'm gonna wash this off. I've got a little bit of extra etching lurking about. Oh, look at that, yeah! Woo, woo, woo. All right, to the sink, boy wonder. Like spray paint in there and in there too. It's time for final assembly. Here we go. That goes there. This goes there. Oh. Okay, oh, right. The nut goes on there. That's it, look at that. That is... Oh man, I am so psyched about this. All right, so then this guy lives in there, and I'm gonna put that in with a dollop of, I'm gonna put it in with just a little bit of butyl. So when you guys get this on production, you can just pry it out. You can glue it back if you want, do however you want, but just know that you pop out that little coin, and I'm gonna send an extra coin. You pop out that little button, and you have access to be able to take this thing apart into its component pieces. What is butyl? I'm not sure I've covered butyl untested before. Okay, butyl is effectively, it's like what they put around your windshield when they pop a new windshield in your car. It is a flexible petroleum-based gasket material. It comes in rolls like this. Jamie Heineman introduced it to the Mythbusters production. He said that when he lived in the Caribbean on a charter boat that he owned, he could repair leaks in his boat from outside underwater using butyl. And it is one of his go-to materials. It's a little like blue tack. It has a similar type of consistency, but it's a little more tenacious. I will tell you that butyl is like half of the Mythbusters and Mythbusters Junior camera team's rigging hardware. Half of their rigging hardware is big chunks of butyl. You need to put a camera on something weird like a dashboard, you lay down some masking tape, stick a big chunk of butyl on there, and jam your GoPro into the butyl, and it will stay. And it's got its own little sort of vibration dampening mount. Butyl is amazing, and it should be in every maker shop. So I'm gonna just toss a little bit of butyl around the edge of this thing, and it'll allow me to stick it down in a way that it's not gonna peel itself back up again, but it will be easy for someone who wants to take it back up. So here we go, a little bit there. There. Ladies and gentlemen. This was a really fun build. And it is a rarity, a one-day build that took less than 1 day. That just never happens. We got the King's Mark, RR for Rabbit Run. We got the rabbit in the edge. Ooh, that's gonna leave a mark. Wooden handle, brass ring, police button in the bottom. It's time to kick some 19th century butt.